On the humid, suffocating night of the 7th of June 2021, the dispatcher in Hampton County, South Carolina, received a frantic 911 call from a sprawling hunting estate known as Moselle. The official narrative handed to the public the very next morning was a tragedy of unimaginable proportions. Alex Murdaugh, a grieving patriarch and pillar of the legal community, had returned home to find his wife, Maggie, and his 22-year-old son, Paul, brutally gunned down near the dog kennels. The police quietly peddled the theory that this was a targeted revenge hit, an execution carried out by mysterious vigilantes. But that was a lie. The contrarian truth, the reality that the local police desperately tried to ignore, was that Alex Murdaugh had blown his own family away with 2 different firearms. We know this because of a hidden cell phone video, locked away in the pocket of a dead boy, proving Alex was standing right next to them seconds before the slaughter. Today, we are going to unpack how a sociopathic attorney executed his family to cover up millions in stolen blood money, and exactly how an entire police force, judicial system, and banking network spent a century ensuring his family could get away with absolutely anything. Look at the crime scene at Moselle. When first responders arrived, they found a bloodbath. Paul had been hit twice with a shotgun, the second blast so devastating it removed his brain from his skull. Maggie had been hunted down with a custom blackout assault rifle, shot 5 times, including a final execution-style bullet to the back of the head. But what you need to pay attention to isn't just the gore, it's what the police did when they arrived, or rather, what they didn't do. Within hours, the crime scene was crawling with people. But they weren't all forensics experts. They were Alex Murdaugh's friends, other lawyers, local elites. Law enforcement allowed these civilians to walk directly through an active double homicide scene. They contaminated evidence. They paced around the bloody tire tracks. Why? Because Alex Murdaugh wasn't just a suspect. In the 14th Circuit of South Carolina, the name Murdaugh was synonymous with God. For nearly a century, 3 generations of the Murdaugh family had continuously held the office of the solicitor, the chief prosecuting agency for a 5-county region. They didn't just practice the law, they owned the law. They decided who went to prison and who went home. They decided which police officers got promoted and which investigations were quietly buried in a filing cabinet. Even though Alex himself wasn't the solicitor, he carried a shiny gold badge in his pocket, a badge granted to him as a volunteer investigator. That badge was a VIP pass to systemic impunity. That night at Moselle, police didn't handcuff him. They didn't isolate him in an interrogation room. They gently asked him questions while he sat in a car, treating him like a fragile victim rather than the primary suspect in a domestic annihilation. They didn't even bother to search the main house for the murder weapons that night. They just took his word for it. But to understand the true, sickening depth of this institutional rot, you cannot look at Moselle in a vacuum. You have to look at the trail of bodies that paved the way there. You have to look at the people the system threw away to protect this family. In 2019, Alex's son, Paul, drunkenly crashed a boat into a bridge piling, throwing 9-year-old Mallory Beach into the dark water to drown. When the survivors were taken to the hospital, Alex Murdaugh arrived. He wasn't there as a concerned parent. He was there as a fixer. Witnesses reported seeing him walking the halls, his gold prosecutor's badge purposefully hanging out of his pocket. He physically entered the hospital rooms of the teenage survivors and told them not to speak to law enforcement. And what did the police do? Nothing. They stood in the hallways and watched a private citizen tamper with witnesses in a vehicular manslaughter case. They didn't give Paul a breathalyzer. They didn't arrest him at the scene. The fix was in, but it gets worse. 4 years prior, in 2015, a 19-year-old boy named Stephen Smith was found dead in the middle of a rural road, his head severely traumatized. Highway patrol investigators at the scene noted that there was no glass, no vehicle debris, and the boy's loose shoes were still on his feet, making it physically impossible for this to be a hit and run. It was a vicious, localized beating. Yet, the local medical examiner's office inexplicably ruled it a hit and run, effectively closing the investigation. In the case files, the Murdaugh name was mentioned by witnesses dozens of times. Yet, investigators were allegedly told by their superiors to look the other way. Stephen Smith's grieving mother was left screaming into a void, silenced by a county that valued the comfort of a wealthy dynasty over the life of a working-class boy. And then there was Gloria Satterfield, the Murdaugh family's loyal housekeeper for over 20 years. In 2018, she supposedly tripped over the family dogs on the brick stairs of Moselle. She suffered a traumatic brain injury and died. This is where the true sickness of the system reveals itself. It's the outrage pivot you need to understand. This wasn't just lazy police work. It was an active, coordinated, multi-agency criminal syndicate. After Gloria died, Alex Murdaugh went to her grieving, vulnerable sons at her funeral. He told them he was going to sue himself, using his insurance policies to get them a massive payout to take care of them. He walked them to a lawyer who was secretly his best friend. He orchestrated a $4.3 million settlement, and the boys never saw a single dime. Alex Murdaugh forged the documents, cashed the checks, and funneled the money into a fake bank account he created to sound like a legitimate consulting firm. But he couldn't do this alone. The systemic failure here is profound and terrifying. How does a man steal millions of dollars in a wrongful death suit? He does it because the local judges, sworn officers of the court, rubber-stamped his settlement documents without asking questions. He does it because executives at Palmetto State Bank actively helped him launder the funds, converting massive settlement checks into cash for him. The police, the judges, the bankers, they all knew. In a small town, you don't steal over $10 million over a decade without the gatekeepers looking the other way. They enabled his opioid addiction, they covered up the boat crash, they ignored the bodies, and they facilitated the theft of millions from widows, orphans, and quadriplegics. The justice system in Hampton County wasn't broken. It was functioning exactly as it was designed to, as a protective fortress for the elite. Which brings us back to the 7th of June 2021. The fortress was crumbling. Alex Murdaugh was out of time. His law firm's CFO had confronted him that very morning about missing funds. In 3 days, a judge was going to force him to open his financial records for the Mallory Beach boat crash lawsuit. The gig was up. He was about to be exposed as a fraud, a thief, and a criminal. He didn't kill his wife and son out of sudden rage. He killed them as a calculated, sociopathic PR move. He believed that if he became a victim, if his family was tragically slaughtered, the lawsuits would stop. The financial audits would pause out of sympathy. He believed he could buy himself time, and he believed the local police would help him do it, just like they always had. He used 2 different guns, a shotgun for Paul, an AR-style rifle for Maggie, to create the illusion of multiple shooters. He washed himself off, drove to visit his mother to establish an alibi, and then returned to play the hysterical, grieving father for the 911 dispatcher. And it almost worked. The local authorities were completely prepared to let this fade into an unsolved mystery. But Alex made one fatal mistake. He didn't know about the cell phone. Minutes before he was executed, Paul Murdaugh was recording a video of a friend's dog in the kennels. In the background of that video, you can clearly hear 3 voices: Paul, Maggie, and Alex. The police had Alex on tape saying he was nowhere near the kennels, asleep in the house. But the digital ghost of his dead son testified from the grave, proving Alex was standing right there at the exact moment the timeline of death began. When this video was finally decrypted months later, the state had no choice but to arrest their golden boy. The trial was a spectacle of arrogance. Alex took the stand, weeping on command, attempting to con a jury one last time. But the evidence of his financial depravity, the timeline, and his endless web of lies were too much. He was convicted and sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms. But as the gavel fell, a sickening reality remained. Alex Murdaugh is in a cage, but the system that built him is still out there. The police officers who let him trample a crime scene still have their badges. The bankers who helped him steal from the dead still wear suits. The judges who signed away millions of dollars to a fraudster still sit on the bench. We celebrate the conviction of one monster, completely ignoring the fact that the village elders were the ones feeding him the victims. If you thought the corruption in South Carolina was infuriating, wait until you hear how a billionaire heir in California bought his way out of a brutal double homicide, turning the LAPD into his own private security force. Click the video on your screen to see the case they tried to bury.